So I want to start with a quote calling out racial capitalism's open secret from Dr. William Barber II. You guys know him. He's now one of the co-chairs of the Poor People's Campaign. At this time, he was president of the North Carolina NAACP. It is the time of the police killing of Keith Lamont Scott in front of his apartment building. In this quote, he's calling out this open secret of racial capitalist violence in response to right-wing accusations that the uprising in response to the police killing was violent. Quote, "Anyone who is concerned about violence in Charlotte should note that no one declared a state of emergency when the city's schools were resegregated, creating a school-to-prison pipeline for thousands of poor African-American children. Few voiced outrage over the damage caused when 500,000 North Carolinians were denied health insurance because the legislature refused to expand Medicaid. When Charlotte's poor black neighborhoods were afflicted with disproportionate law enforcement during the war on drugs, condemning a whole generation to bad credit and a lack of job opportunities, our elected representatives didn't call it violence. When immigration officers raid homes and snatch undocumented children from bus stops, they don't call it violence. But all of these policies in practice do violence to the lives of thousands of Charlotte residents. As a pastor and an organizer, I do not condone violent protest, but I must join the Charlotte demonstrators in condemning the systemic violence that threatened Mr. Scott's body long before an officer decided to use lethal force against him." So the open secret here is that black and brown lives have already been put under the sign of expropriability as the condition of contemporary public policy. North Carolina cannot name municipal zoning, public health policy, and law enforcement practitioners as purveyors of violence because to the state, these are administrative matters that process in the name of liberal democratic reason. It may seem like there are affinities here with what Charles Mills calls white ignorance and Manu Vimalachari, Juliana Hupiges, and Alyosha Goldstein call colonial unknowing, and there are. But rather than underline, as they do, what white settler supremacy forgets or makes opaque, I want to focus on how it knows the categories of commensurate making and transactability that at once enact, whitewash, and make inactionable the violence realized with, for, and as a capital accumulation. Barber calls this violence systemic, but I think we need to think of it as constitutive as much as systemic, instituting as much as institutional, along the lines of something I'll call the violence of the setup, which is not a one-time thing, but a ceaseless rational material process of setting up, making transactable, putting into the value form for what Marx called the capital relation.